Mike, how's it?
How's it? Yeah.
Here we are in the deep south with Mr. Mike Schlebach. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Schlebach, it's good,
Schlebach.
yeah.
That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And this is where all the big boys play. The hardcore big wave riders. Live a humble life, but when the swell hits, you get out of your shell and you ride giants.
Yeah, like I grew up in kommetjie, you know, and geez, man, my mother left my father when I was 1 year old from Joburg, and she drove down through the Karoo, and with her 4 children in a combi, and ended up living in kommetjie on the beach.
Wow, what a brave woman.
Yeah, we grew up here, my siblings and I, and I started surfing at like I was 5 or 6 years old or something, but mostly on a bodyboard and for my sins until I was about 23. And then, yeah, man, but we had a great time, you know. In the 80s and 90s, kommetjie was all about bodyboarding, eh?
And when did you get into big wave surfing?
I really got into stand-up surfing from when I was 23 full-time.
Yeah.
And from there, you know, I was on my bodyboard. I was already riding bigger waves, you know, and I'd surf Sunset and the Crayfish Factory and the Kommetjie always on my boogie.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, when I started full-time surfing, it was quite an easy and natural progression. And so I don't know, from around 23, 24. You know, I paddled out at Sunset, I don't know when it was, but it was probably around 2002 or 3 or something.
Yeah.
On my 7.6 that I've got, paddled out and Simon Lowe and Andrew Marr and Ross Lindsay and Ricky Duffus and them all tow surfing on their rubber ducks. And they had to stop and watch me try and have a surf because they weren't allowed to tow. So that was pretty funny. I had all this like pressure on me. These guys sitting on their boats right next to me, like staring me down.
Yeah. So those were your peers, eh? Those chaps. Cas Collier.
Yeah, Kaz and Ian. You know, I grew up surfing with Ian. He didn't take too lightly to bodyboarders in the early days. He used to burn me all the time. Yeah, I mean, Ian's a huge inspiration. Really good surfer, and you know, one of the most amazing surfers to watch at Cork Bay Reef and. All the sort of highly technical waves and that, but we don't really see him much out at in the big waves anymore, or bigger waves. Crayfish Factories are regular.
So for those of you who are watching and don't know about sort of the area that we're talking about here in South Africa, we're talking about some of the gnarliest, biggest waves on the African coastline, on the South African coastline, and you know, Mark's been at the forefront, you know, of big wave surfing for the last 2 decades, really, basically. But you're quite an understated dude. I mean, you don't you don't put it out there much. You just get on with it. You're out in the lineup on the biggest days. I mean, recently, were you out on this biggest Wednesday?
Yeah, Jake Kolnick, my tow partner, and he's my oldest friend. You know, we were walking around nappies together here in kommetjie. Yeah, we've been giving it horns ever since. You know, there was a period between probably like 2005 and like 2015 where I don't think we missed a swell at Dungeons, and you know, like surfing every time. You know. Every time waves broke at sunset. We were first out on Big Wednesday. It was actually John Grendon's that swell came on the same day that John Grendon died. An old surfing legend here in the deep south. And,
okay.
So a lot of people called it the John Grendon swell.
Yeah, Rip John.
Yeah. So yeah, we were out first light. I think we got there at about 5:45 or something, and on our first wave we landed up losing our tow board, and Jake had to swim to the beach, and I ended up getting taken out by big white water on the ski, and luckily the thing cut out and didn't get washed too far. But
shall we grab a drink and carry on this conversation about Big Wednesday?
Lekker.
Let's do it.
All right.
Episode 2, shredding the Gnar, Mike Schlebach, one of the local legends down here on the deep south, and not so local legend, but a legend nonetheless, Ricky Basnett, who happens to, he just gate crashed this party, but I mean, I thought he might as well come on and say hello, because he was sitting back home in Durban frothing at the same time. Boys of the deep south were dropping in at 20, 25 foot belters. How were you feeling at the time, sitting and watching from Cape
You know
Town?
what? These eyes here don't mess around. Those are hardcore. And it makes me feel good inside, seeing those go hard. Those have been charging. That's what counts.
But I'm sure that you watched with eager eyes at the charts when that swell hit.
I gotta say, I'm pretty jealous I didn't get down here to get involved in that. I checked Redmond and Mark and a couple of those getting some belter sunset. Eesh! It's like the biggest I think I've ever seen it, for sure.
Coastline around Cape Town is some of the most scenic in the world, and the breaks around you are gnarly, it's cold, and the dudes that live in this area are absolute chargers. They're quiet guys, but when the swell hits, they become men. They become men. and that particular swell would, you know, we've seen it on the charts before, and it normally looks promising and then it just heads off and disappears. But that one was pointed straight at sunset.
Everything was focused in on that reef there. It was heavy.
Episode 2, shredding the Gnar, Mike Schlebach. So let's carry on with that thread of big Wednesday. How many days before was the forecast sort of like you knew it was actually going to happen?
You know, we've had an absolutely diabolical surf season the last like 4 or 5 months. Even last winter was probably one of the worst winters in terms of big waves we've ever really had. Since like October, November last year, we've pretty much, Long Beach, you know, this area hasn't been bigger than like 3 foot more than 4 or 5 times, you know.
Wow.
So then we checked, I remember, you know, doing my morning ritual of checking Wind Guru or checking one of the surf forecasts, and you know, these things often they're like, you know, on the 8 or 9 day, you know, extended forecast window thing, often there's like a big bump in the swell, and then as the days draw closer, it like peters out, you know. And this one, it was massive. It was like 6 meters at like 18 seconds or something, and with very little wind. And this is a sort of an 8 or 9 day forecast. And I remember taking a screenshot of that and sending it to a couple of mates, and I was like, wouldn't this be nice, you know? And and then it was amazing actually, because you know, the swell as the days drew closer, actually it got bigger and the conditions got better, you know. It was one of those rare times when, you know, the extended forecast looked really good and it actually stayed good, you know. Also checked like synoptics and the charts, and this thing started like, you know, in the right place off South America, and you know, tracked basically west straight across the Atlantic Ocean, and just stayed its course. In the last like 5 years or so, when we had a drought here in the Western Cape, you know, a lot of those swells and storms that we're tracking from South America, when they tracked across the South Atlantic, they would like almost do like a 50 or 60 degree turn just before, you know, 2,000 or 3,000 k's off the coast of South Africa, or just straight down towards the South Pole or like into the Indian Ocean, you know. And then Indo and, you know, Western Australia and all those areas would get pumping waves, you know. This one held its course, and well, we were really stoked. Yeah,
it's almost as if it was pointed directly at sunset, you know. It's like it honed in on sunset, because it was.
Yeah, look, I mean, the conditions on the day were like good, but it wasn't like super clean and paddleable, you know. So I mean, we had, you know, the day before I bumped into a couple of the O's. Everyone like 3 or 4 days before the swell arriving, I checked all the O's dusting off their big wave guns and paddling at Vitsans and just getting in the water to get their muscles moving again. Because I mean, everyone's been, you know, wave starved. I mean, and then the day before, like Simon and Jake and I were getting our stuff ready. I spent pretty much the whole day like mentally preparing, but also just getting shit ready, you know, all the final tweaks on your equipment and all that kind of stuff, and putting the fins in the boards and waxing up and making sure leash plugs are in. I was up at like 4:30 or something that Wednesday morning, and you know, we were checking out, trying to see what was up in the dark, and we have a buoy off like 5 k's off the coast here, and every time a big swell shows up, it breaks down.
Murphy's Law.
Yeah, Murphy's Law. So, we would drive around in the dark wondering if the swells actually showed up or not. Yeah, it was quite a sight to behold. I could see sunset capping in the dark, and the waves were ginormous there. So,
and you snagged a few bombs.
Yeah, we had some absolute bombs there. We had a lot of like high drama. Jake and I were like, the one thing about sunset and generally the waves in Cape Town is that we have a lot of kelp. And jet skis don't like kelp. They stop dead. So we had a couple of incidents where we had got kelp in our intake while I was rescuing him. Happened to be me on the ski both times. and I got kelp in the intake, and we got taken out by 12-foot whitewaters or something. We've had it before, many years ago, where the same thing happened, and it was like a 25-foot whitewater, and we got obliterated and sank our ski and spent 50k trying to fix it again.
So how, in that instance, when you've got this massive wall of whitewater coming at you and your skis playing games, do you ditch it and do you dive? Or what's the protocol?
Yeah, you should ditch because jet skis weigh 250, 300 kilos or something, it's and you could easily break a leg. If you end up tumbling with it or whatever, then you actually want to get as far away from it as possible. But on both these times Jake was on the sled, we were trying to race away from this whitewater, and he was just looking up at me, and I'm going, because I'm trying to push the accelerator thing or whatever, and it just wasn't moving. Yeah. But I try to hold on, and
so at this point so what do you do? You pointed.
Yeah, I pointed at the beach.
Okay.
And then you're going 3 or 4 knots.
It's goggling along.
It's puttering along, and so you think maybe that you might get some momentum and be able to sort of ride it out, because sunset eventually the wave peters out. But it bucked me straight away pretty much. And then the ski, luckily Jeremy Johnson, him and another guy by the name of Darty Lowe, they were looking for their towboard, and they saw what happened, and they came and helped us get our ski back. But our sled was snapped perfectly in half.
Wow.
And we've had that sled since the beginning. We bought it. It came from Hawaii 15 years ago.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah. So we had a couple of those types of incidents, and with a mega swell like that, there was sort of kelp floating around in the lineup, because it just rips it out of the ground. But we had, I probably had about 15 or so waves myself personally. Jake had probably a few more. The morning session was pretty wild because it was just the 2 of us. Yeah. And then a couple of other guys rocked up. There were more photographers out there that day than...
I believe so.
than actually guys surfing.
On a day like that, what are your feelings like emotionally? Are you amped? Are you crapping yourself? Is there a mix of emotions when you're having to deal with a hardcore situation like you've just described? Do you just keep it cool? Do you panic a little bit?
Yeah, so I've been doing this a long time, and getting on older now, but Kelly Slater's proved that age is nothing, right?
There we go.
When these swells come, we do cuck ourselves. I cuck myself. I know Jake does. All those do. You obviously ride high on adrenaline and that kind of stuff, and there's a lot of sanctity in your preparation work. It's making sure that you're generally pretty fit, so that when these days do come, you can survive, and also that your equipment is in the right place.
Like a ritual. You go through.
Sometimes you got work on, and the swell arrives out of nowhere, and or you're dropping kids off or whatever, and you just you don't have the time to get yourself into that space, where everything's sort of taken care of, and those days, every now and again you'll have the best surf day you've had all year, when it comes out of nowhere. One of my sort of personal redeeming qualities in big wave surfing is that I don't really panic. I think in those kinds of situations, it's a good quality to have.
Have you honed that quality? Do you think it's something that you've learned over the years? Do you recall yourself always being like that, or is it something that you think you've sort of grown and you've matured with, and the ocean has helped you sort of grow in that aspect?
I've grown to appreciate it, but it's something that's I've been born with. It was when I was on a bodyboard, even I used to ride big waves and get completely and and be okay with it, you know. It's like when I started paddle surfing, you know, it was a pretty quick progression into the big stuff, and you know, I had that sort of temperament already, you know. So it's so like, you know, as much as there is that element, you do get nervous, and like, you know, generally the night before a monster swell can be pretty sleepless. And that's also that is something I wish I could change rather. I mean, I'd prefer to
have a good night's rest.
A good night's rest, and then, you know, obviously your state of mind's in a much clearer space.
Let's chat about protect the West Coast, because the thing about this, chatting to all you big wave legends down here in the deep south, is the angle is like, why do big wave surfers seem to want to do good in terms of conservation? And like, I mean, there's a deep connection to the ocean, and I mean, you're driven by that. So protect the West Coast, how heavily involved are you? So protect the West Coast, we it's a registered NGO here in South Africa, and we started up in late 2020, basically. You know, after my exit out of Sealand, you know, I found myself with some time, and, you know, I've been surfing up and down the West Coast all my life. My mom took me up there to Elands Bay for my 13th birthday, and ever since then, you know, I've been going up there dozens of times a year on average. There was an original surfing group with, I think Twiggy was involved there, with Anne Fox, and Frank Solomon was talking to the group as well. There's people like Tony Budden from Emporium, and Camilla, his wife. They were really concerned about all this new mining operations, and the thing with the West Coast is that it's very much like out of sight, out of mind. But all these mining operations are starting to come further south, you know, down into like bigger towns like Lambert's Bay and Elands Bay and all that kind of stuff. And it's also where, you know, all the waves are. And I found myself with a bit of time on my hands, and you know, the group was starting to talk to each other and trying to sort of activate and getting word out into the public domain about what was happening up there. But you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and Oaks had, you know, people were losing their jobs, and like, it was just a really bad time to start something like that. And so I sort of came in and sort of galvanized a little team, and we started the process a year and a bit later now. You know, we've come a long way, you know. We've basically brought what's happening up on the West Coast from a mining perspective into the public domain, you know, and we're working with other local communities and local NGOs and the fishing communities and the Khoisan communities, and trying to just sort of highlight their plight. We commissioned a film last year called Ours Not Mine, that is on YouTube now. Anybody can watch it there. We'll leave all the links below for Protect the West Coast and the films down below, so check it out. It's a really great film made by Fly on the Wall Films, Brian Little and his partner Philippa, and it was funded by Patagonia International, which we're really grateful for. We've spent the last year and a bit just really putting the West Coast on the map. You know, we've also connected with the surfing community, like you know, with Kai and Dutchie. They put together a surf contest. I think it was a WSL sanctioned surf contest, you know, in one of the main areas where the mining is happening. We've been partnering with some running groups that have been, you know, there's a guy by the name of Dom DeJesus, and he's put together an organization called Run West. And him and a group of, you know, other activists and runners are running the entire coast of the West Coast, from where the main Australian mining operation, MSR, are running their operation down all the way down to Cape Point. The next leg, they're doing a leg from Elands Bay down, I don't know, it's about 100 k's, so they do like 100 k's at a time. So we've basically been trying to highlight and encourage other alternative uses of the West Coast, like surfing events and running events and hiking trails and fishing. And, you know, there's a massive Khoisan community up there that have been living up there for hundreds of years. You know, there's a huge heritage element which has completely all been, you know, set aside. Ignored, and you've got massive mining operations just like burning through middens and you know taking out paintings, and you know, just like it's just absolutely zero consideration, you know. So we made the film, and we've done a pretty good job from a marketing perspective. Just trying to tell the general public what's going on up there, and now we're entering a phase where we're really feeling like the only real way to get stuff done is through the courts.
And so we're entering a new phase now where Protect the West Coast will probably be getting involved or supporting legal challenges and stuff like that. We already are, but I think it's going to be in the next year or so. But yeah, it's been quite a journey, and had a lot of fun, met some really cool people, and it's really nice to work with people that are so passionate about climate change and doing good for the people of this country, you know.
Well, Mark, thanks ever so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Cool.
We appreciate your insights, and we're going to leave all the links down below, as I've said before. But just before I go, you've got an exciting new venture coming up, a freediving company, is that correct?
Yeah, so I partnered with Hanley Prinsloo and her partner Peter. We're putting together a new freediving, a global freediving brand.
Awesome.
We're only launching product probably later this year,
Okay.
sort of towards the end of the year.
So keep an eye out for that.
So keep an eye out for that, yeah. It's a
And all of you
project.
freedivers, this is the man you need to come and see. If you want to see some of the most beautiful freediving spots in the world, this is it, down on the deep south.
Yeah.
Kommetjie.
I think my octopus teacher on steroids.
There we go. What a way to describe it. Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure, brother.
Thanks, Steve. All
Thanks
the best,
very
man.
much, eh?
Cheers, brother.
Shred.